My name's Kevin, K-E-V-I-N, Bergersen, B-E-R-G-E-R-S-E-N. I'm the boating law administrator for the state of Arizona, and my specific job title with the Game and Fish Department is the Wildlife Law Enforcement Programs Coordinator. The role with the Game and Fish Department that has been resultant since this critter's been found, primarily at this waterway and as well as the Colorado River, is that it's created a more intensified, focused approach towards getting the information out to the boaters to educate them on a proactive basis, because the proactive approach is going to be critical from our perspective based on our boater use densities. We have some of the highest boater use densities in the country, and it's not feasible nor is it realistic to contact, for example, 3,000 boaters exiting one launch ramp in a busy afternoon trying to get off the lake in 60 short minutes. So that's probably not a realistic approach. A more realistic and reasonable approach is to practice our outreach and marketing strategies through our registration processes, through our marina and slip partners, and through our commercial transport companies to head movement of this critter off before it becomes a problem, before it's discovered in Utah, before it's on I-15 up in Wyoming or wherever. We want to stop it first through education, to educate our boaters, to give them the knowledge to keep them from moving it unconsciously or worse, intentionally. Within the state of Arizona, there are 22 different law enforcement entities providing boating law enforcement in various degrees, with different authorities and different responsibilities and different funding sources that allow or not allow certain activities to occur. For example, we have Federal Park Service rangers along the Colorado River and different national parks and recreational areas that have different authorities than us. And in some instances, their authorities are more broad, some more narrow, and in some instances they're more restrictive. We have 22 different law enforcement agencies in the state of Arizona, each with their own funding sources and restrictions on what they can and cannot enforce. There's different CFRs at play, county rules and regulation, municipal codes and state federal laws, as well as game and fish rules. And there's different abilities and different authorities for each agency. You got the National Park Service rangers at different recreation areas and national parks with broad-based authorities with superintendent compendiums that allow them to do very specific things, and which is working for them. You have municipalities who have recreational boating authority within the waterways within their municipal boundaries that may or may not have invasive species on their radar or have the ability to do that type of enforcement. You have county municipal law enforcement agencies that, according to an Attorney General opinion, have the primary law enforcement and emergency response responsibility and capability for the state of Arizona. That's that 911 accountability. So their priorities are going to be more towards the public safety side of things and maybe not so much that invasive species linkage. Then you have conservation agencies such as the Arizona Game and Fish Department that has the authority and the ability on a statewide basis as part of their mission to actively engage in invasive species enforcement. And because of that authority and because of the state laws that we've put in place, we can now partner with the municipalities and the county law enforcement agencies and to a certain extent the National Park Service and other federal entities to have a more broad-based approach and collaborative effort in wrapping our arms around the enforcement challenges that quagga mussels and zebra mussels and indeed all aquatic invasive species offer law enforcement agencies. Our conservation officers, our wildlife manager position, which are our enforcement arm of our department, when we're on the water, we're actively engaged at public safety laws, rules, and regulation, carriage requirements that are in place by the United States Coast Guard for safety equipment. We're also actively looking for fishing license monitoring and compliance, and not so much the invasive species component, because once they're on the water, there's no real reason to talk to them other than to perhaps educate them. Hey, later on today when you're pulling your vessel off the water, are you aware that this is an invasive species waterway? It's got identified through Director's Order 2 that quagga mussels are, in fact, residents of this particular body of water, and in order to prevent the movement of that particular invasive species, there are new laws and rules and regulations that now require boat owners to clean, drain, and dry their boats before they leave the waterway. And they'll say, what does that mean? And we say, that's simple. Just clean, drain, and dry your boat. Life is good. Have a nice day. Come back and visit our lake. Okay, since the advent of the quagga mussel being introduced to the state of Arizona, there's been laws, rules, and procedures, director's orders put into place over the last 3 or 4 years that are now starting to become to the forefront of public awareness through some of the outreach and education programs that the invasive species coordinators such as Tom McMahon are implementing not only here in Arizona but across the West. Now we're trying to gain traction with the public for the acceptance of this and to actually change behavior. Just because now you have a law in place, I believe that there is a very high awareness of quagga mussels and invasive species in general. We know this from a boater use survey that we do triennially, where we ask, are you aware of what quagga mussels are? I want to say 75–80% of the people asked, boat owners now, know or have at least heard of invasive species or quagga mussels. And whether or not that transcends to a behavioral change and awareness of what to do to clean, drain, and dry their boat once they're leaving a body of water, but before they go to another waterway, that remains to be seen. So we're deploying additional resources by expanding some of our invasive species staff to come out and monitor the ramps to see what behaviors are occurring. I mean, what percentage of boaters, as they're leaving this ramp right here, the 10 lane at Lake Pleasant, how many out of 1,000 boaters on Memorial Day are going to take the time to pull their plug? How many are going to drain the standing water? How many are people going to remove that wet, damp, humid environment that is necessary for vealage or transport? We don't know. We don't know what we don't know. So we want to find out. So once we have that, now we have tools in place to address those types of issues further. What those actions may be remain to be seen. We got to get our arms around what is the public reaction and response to those particular rules.